Okay, at this time, I'd like to introduce David Pollock from the Community Security Initiative. Before David begins, all questions throughout the presentation, please place them in the chat and direct them to Terry Byrne. Select Terry Byrne in the chat. He's going to be fielding the questions for Q&A after the presentation. David?
Thank you, Seth. Thank you to all of our regulars. And I'm pleased to announce that we had more reservations for this session than any other. We keep growing, which means that I hope that we're answering your questions. Keep those cards and letters coming in and tell us what you need. And we're going to try to supply answers to your questions. One other point that I'm going to make before I hand it over to Dov and Ilya, the nonprofit security grant applications are probably going to be available mid to late March. What this means is you might have 2 weeks to fill out an application after it's released by New York State. Dave Middleton out in Iowa, I don't know anything about Iowa, so that's up to you. But 2 weeks in New York, it's going to be a very, very tight timeline. They're going to be changing the investment justification. They say they're making it simpler, but we haven't seen anything yet. We will get as much information to you as we can, as soon as we can. Our advice to you is get started now. Even if you have the old IJ filled out, investment justification, for those of you who don't know the alphabet soup of the grant, even if you fill that out, I'm sure it will be very simple to transfer that information onto the 2022 form. With that said, I turn it over to Dov and Ilya. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Seth. Good morning, everybody. Good to see a lot of you back and a couple new attendees. As you see, we definitely, like David just mentioned, we appreciate your input. We take your input. The Q&As at the end is an important segment that we do so we can address questions directly. But additionally, these polls, actually, we take them back. We use them for our guidance to continue improving. We get the emails through the CSI questions format or directly to your RSM. So we're continuously evolving, continuously building. Before we take the survey down, if yours is still up, first of all, welcome again to the new attendees. You'll see kind of the format, how we do it. And for those of you who've been here since the beginning, thank you so much. We're glad you enjoyed it. And please keep sharing your input. We definitely use that to guide us in how we move forward. A lot of this stuff is often very fresh. We use examples from the field. For those of you who have been with us before or watched our recordings, we always start with this. There's some important pieces we don't want to miss. The first few weeks, we went pretty deep. We explained a lot of the procurement rules. I mean, week one, we explained how to identify which grant you have, right? These are realistic questions. So for those of you returning or those of you who missed a few, it's hard for us, almost impossible, to keep going to each thing every week. So make sure you both watch old recordings or potentially even review the FAQs, the frequently asked questions that we're going to try and update weekly with the questions that literally come through our chat function. So obviously we'll answer them in real time. And like we said, put your questions to Terry, please. He'll be monitoring our Q&A. We can make sure we answer your questions, hopefully on topic, but we're here and we'll address anything that comes through. Once in a while, it's a little technical and we might have to get back to you. So our real quick recap, because we're now into the weeds and the fun stuff about your hardware and your installations. First of all, as we always say, we are an unaffiliated, nonprofit resource for you at the JCRC Community Security Initiative. So when you have official questions, if you need to make a change, get that confirmation from your state rep. In New York State, it's the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, DISHES. They want to help you. Obviously, every single one has little different personalities, but stay close with them, keep them posted. It's always better doing the mother may I than trying to figure out afterwards. Like I said, pay attention to our FAQs. They're on the Consultants Corner website. I think that can address a lot of recurring questions. Definitely, we kind of conjoin some because there are common stuff. And as long as this grant's been out and a lot of you are new to the process, it's definitely good to see what everyone else is asking. So most importantly is understanding what your contractual obligations are, right? You signed a contract to utilize these government funds. There's certain rules you have to follow. We've gone through this in previous weeks. If you find our Consultants Corner webpage, it'll break down what we discussed each week. But you can see that the comments we have here, we don't have to go through each. But obviously, once your contract's executed, you have to do certain advertisement requirements. If you have the New York State Hate Crimes Grant, you need to do the Minority Woman Owned Business Enterprise requirements. And you always need to get 3 bids, always. There are some nuances, but you got to work with your rep. So unless you get some sort of okay, get those 3 bids, 3 official bids. And the scoring criteria matrix that we showed you an example of, that way to level bids, to review bids, is a requirement. It doesn't have to be the matrix per se, but to level them, to compare them, is something you should have designed before you go out to advertise. An important piece we always bring up, I'll probably always have it on my summary slide, is to keep your notes, your records. That's what DHSES will look for, probably in all the states. They want to see your records of how you followed the contract, how you follow the rules. Because the state, and this is an important clarification, their role is to make sure you follow the procurement rules, how you navigate the process. But they're not there to actually look at your installation, say you did a good security install, the right equipment, the right specs. That's not their expertise, and that's not their capability. And they actually want to stay away from that. They're leaving that to you to do it right, to work with your consultants, whoever it may be, to design it right. They really are just more about the administrative side. We went through the recap of those core pieces, summed up, probably about 5 or 6 weeks of webinars. But what about a workflow summary, right? We started talking about in the last few weeks. It might have seemed like there's a lot of stuff out there, right? We've talked about a lot of the different pieces of the package. But the fact is, most of you, especially those who've been through the process before, we are moving along. And that's a big message that all of us, myself, Ilya, your RSMs, want to make sure you're aware. We believe in that step-by-step process. And we think most of you are, because we work with you offline, email, phones, visits. We are moving the needle. I mean, we have a couple years for this. Let's not race to the finish line, but let's also not wait, because some of this stuff takes time, right? Those of you under the EHP process, many of you are probably still waiting. Actually, very importantly, some, even with the hate crimes grant that does not require an EHP, I've noticed there are a few state hate crimes grant that the contract hasn't been executed. So make sure your contract is executed. You signed off, the state said, okay, go, start advertising before you move forward. But that means we're moving along. We're moving along the process. Now, what we're looking at here, it's not an exact science, but it puts it right. There could be pieces that go back and forth a little bit. It's the real world, but you can see we're moving along. You guys got your grant award, got the contract signed. The federal NSGP awardees have submitted your EHP, which is a crucial document for many reasons. And we started talking about your RFP, your request for proposals, right? That package, right? That's what we've been talking about the last few weeks. And we've slowly turned into the specifications of the projects you are doing, right? And that's what we'll continue with today with Ilya. What goes into that RFP package? That's what we've been talking about the last few weeks, right? So Ilya talked about the cover letter. That's definitely something we can share with you. It, again, doesn't have to be overly technical, but it says some general assumptions we expect for the people that respond to your ad. And it's a package. So you could include your EHP. You've done a lot of this homework already, where you want certain things to be installed, which doors will be upgraded. You've lined this up already. And then the next piece of this package, the next piece of the RFP package, will be to kind of bundle this, and we can also even additionally supply some specs documents. But the point is not to become overwhelmed with some of those documents. First, start simple. Your EHP, put down the bullets of what you want, right? Ilya talked a few weeks ago about doing the product research, right? Understanding what kind of capabilities are out there. Now, we're not going to tell a vendor we want this certain brand. You actually cannot do that according to the procurement rules. But you can understand what's out there and start putting some basic details, a couple bullets, build it with your RFP package. We can even review it over at CSI and then start kind of formalizing this package. But everyone has their own temperature. There's no requirement to make this complete RF package. But we at CSI think this is crucially important, as we've seen over the years that some of these projects go awry. Vendors aren't delivering what we want. We're not getting good security. And if worse, maybe even a false sense of security. So as you're developing that RFP package, we've talked about the last few weeks, so definitely watch some previous webinars. you can start looking and start posting your advertisement. DHSES puts out an example of what this language could be. I'm sure most of you have started drafting, if not already posted your ads. That's the next thing, Seth. And there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Now, let's understand, we've talked about many weeks, your advertisement might not get a lot of responses. Again, somewhere where CSI can assist you once your advertisement is posted. If you can share that with us, we can help distribute it to vendors in the area. And the next thing, and this is the advertisement's a procurement requirement, right? Over $10,000 project. And the bid process. This is that matrix. Next piece, Seth. This is the matrix that basically is leveling your bids in a very simple format. It doesn't have to be this per se, and it's definitely something you can design with your committee, but ideally before you get your bids, so you know what you're looking for. And then in future weeks, start talking about, once we select the vendors, how to go through that process. But we're moving along. So kudos to everybody. I just want to kind of summarize those pieces we've talked about the last few weeks. If you still have questions, obviously the previous sessions, reach out to your RSM or any of us to keep assisting. Next slide, please, Seth. So without belaboring it, we've worked behind the scenes, the whole team, through training, through external consultants and experts we work with, just because there's always changes and there's always updates, that we do have some documents. Now, some technical specification documents. The point is not for you guys to read every word of it, but you could include with your package if you request it from your RSM. But this doesn't take away from you actually saying what you want. This is not going to list each. The example here is for door hardening, right, which we've been talking about the last few weeks. And it's a couple page document, maybe 10 pages, but you still need to kind of specify what you want, which doors, the level of security, what you plan to do with it. And that's what we've been talking about these few weeks. This is a supporting document to make sure all those little nuanced pieces don't get ignored by your vendor, or worse, potentially throwing that cost on top of it because they answered your bid just based on what you put out there. This way, they can't assume anything. It's all included. So a little bit word heavy slide, but I just want to express how to work best with CSI, with us, a community security initiative, with your RSM, your regional security manager, or even Ilya and myself. We are joined at the hip with the team members. One thing we have to all recognize, and especially I think you all see from the last few weeks, your RSM is slammed. They are doing a lot of things. There's so much important work happening for the community, and they want to. We want to help every single one of you. So just my point, because I've had this issue myself, even with my own good tracking systems, is it's hard to keep tabs where everything necessarily is with your project. So the same way in previous weeks, right, when you contact your DHSES rep and you give your contract number, keep us up to date. Last time we discussed we're looking at a contract of this amount for this project. Here's our specific question. It just helps us be quicker and stay on the ball. And I think it's just a good way to work together, just because I personally am starting to get in that point, and it definitely helps us. Like I said, as we are going through the procurement process slide 2 slides ago, as you are figuring out what exactly it is you want, right? So whether we give you some sort of template documents or not, you should be taking your EHP if you have it. And if not, start listing out what exactly it is you want. So if we have some calls with a grantee, we obviously will give you some ideas and general concepts, and we can go a little deeper. But the first step, I think, for many of you is just, okay, we have a door project, we have a window project, an access control project. What does that mean to you, right? Put some bullets, just your wants, your interests, how you want it to be, what this project should be. And definitely, like we said before, some of your research into hardware, into manufacture and products should be included there. So this will steer your RFP package. There's a lot of ways you can get this information. Like I said, your assessment, especially if you got one from our team, we're continuously developing and growing our assessments, has a lot of more technical details. Look at your assessment for that subject category. Your EHP has some ideas, the research you did, and then obviously through partnership with us. And then if you do ask for that RFP cover letter and the template and the additional specs, we can assist that. But again, it's not everything, and it's not always required. So we got to kind of measure that demand and need based on your project. And like we said, just to reiterate, share your advertisements with us, but also share how it's coming. If a week later you have no bids, 2 weeks later you have one bid, keep us posted. There's no way for us to track it. We can't refer anybody. We can't, we don't even, when we share a bids to our networks, we don't even tell them who the location is, right? Just like your advertisement should be generic. We don't specify who it is, but we try to target to, a vendor in your region if that's an option. So before we go back into our door hardening topic of the week, I want to explain something that we all believe is very, very important and should be crucial in your design. And as you think about the door projects you do, code comes first. There, especially, right, those in a school and educational environment, we have to be careful. There's all these new products that came on the market. I don't know what organizations have approved them, but there's code. And the problem also with code is it can be different by jurisdiction. So you have to be familiar with what's okay in your jurisdiction. You have to be, you have to know the fire code, the building code. And it's not that you have to be aware of it, but there's a simple rule. You want one motion egress, single motion egress. These pictures we are showing here, and thank you to our friends at Securitech who put this together for us. Some of the items on the market that I would just be very, very careful before utilizing this. There's other things we have to worry about too. Obviously, the point of our session is to talk security and hardware and doing it right, but doing it right also means following code. So if people can't get out of a room with one motion, a push bar, right? That's like that exit push bar, panic bar, right? On an exterior door, or even a handle. It has to be a simple way to get out because of either fire reasons, or there's other reasons too sometimes that these are not equipment that we would recommend you install. And in fact, there's definitely examples we've seen where a fire marshal comes through and says, rip that out of there. This does not comply. And you've now done a project, spent some money, thought you had some security. And I'm not saying it doesn't provide some levels of protection, but with that yin, you got some yang. So we just wanted to make sure before we go too deep that we all have that in mind. And that's why another reason we're doing some of these sessions for you to really see how to do it right when you upgrade your door hardware.
Just to jump in, Dov.
Yeah.
While we were doing our active threat training last week, an executive director of a synagogue in Westchester said, well, here we have this great product, and it's one of these products shown. And I said, well, the New Rochelle school system just put in their product, and the fire marshals ordered them to pull them all out. So they might be inexpensive at first, but if you have to pull them out and then get the right product, get the right product.
Or worst case scenario, that something actually does happen because we had something that was against code and therefore we had a poor end result.
And by the way, when you say code comes first, if you have a product, either check with us, and if we don't know specifically, we don't know. UL is a very good start. If a product is UL certified, that's one way to start. And, you can always call up your local building or fire departments and find out.
And I'll leave it like this as I turn to Ilya. That's another reason. Thank you, David. That's another reason why we're doing these. You follow these directions, we won't lead you astray. And thank you again to Securitech for this picture. And with that, thank you. And over to you, Ilya.
Thanks, Dov. Just want to pick up on this point as I move on to the rest of my portion of this webinar, to alert you all that the worst thing you can have in your organization is the false sense of security. Now, these words are thrown around very often. Okay, false sense of security, false sense of security. Okay, now I have to share with you my sad point that I see. Every time I conduct a security assessment, there is a false sense of security. Every single time. Now, it might apply to a certain portion of an organization. It might apply to certain people in the organization because they're in denial. Okay, but what you see in front of you, and the reason why we didn't blow up every one of these images is to just give you a sheer magnitude of products that vendors are happy to sell you. They're very happy for you to keep buying them. Okay, although what they're also doing, which is very unethical, they're not trying to find out whether you even understand what it is that you're buying. They don't care because they work on volumes and profit margins. Okay, so please remember that. okay, you can easily protect your organization from the false sense of security if you just do a little bit more checking. Okay, get that UL certification letter, get the verification from your local fire department, building department that, hey, these products is what we prefer to be used in our jurisdiction so that you don't fail your next fire inspection. Forget about threats. Your next fire inspection may cause you to realize that you've just spent a ton of money in vain. To all of you, these look like familiar images. The one on the left is something that I shared with you during the last webinar. It is the door that I would mark as something that you should never install at your facility. This is the storefront aluminum door with massive pieces of glass that is nearly impossible to protect without making it look completely different. Okay, this is a solution that is unfortunately just doesn't work for enhancing your security posture and your level of protection. I completely respect the fact that some facilities have installed such doors before, simply because in our industry, even architects sometimes don't understand which doors are more secure or less secure. Okay, and they recommend, okay, this seems like a good value for money, they say. Sure, from an aesthetic point of view, from an acquisition procurement point of view, it may be so. But when we talk about protection, okay, you have to go to a different level. The other two types of doors, the one in the middle is the solid wood door, and the one on the right is the hollow metal door. I put question marks there to alert you to the fact that while in most conditions, when you buy a solid wood door or hollow metal door, they may be perfect for your facility, and they may be a good security solution for you to enhance security of your facility. But just take a look at a couple of nuances around the photos that I'm sharing with you. Okay, take a look at how much glass is used in this entire door assembly. Right? Would you want to protect so much glass? Do you need it? Okay, to what extent? Right? And so there are obviously multiple types or multiple variations in fabrication and in the look and design of solid wood doors and hollow metal doors. And as we said last time, the less glass, the better. No glass is best. However, we also want to respect your aesthetic choices, and our team works and answers questions from your community when they engage architects or if they're working directly with vendors to help guide both your peer group and the vendors to the right types of solutions, okay, and try to minimize the vulnerability. Again, for everyone's benefit, this is just a slide to introduce to you what a decent and a secure door might look like. Now, the reason why I'm showing you something that you typically wouldn't see, because this is missing a wall, obviously, on all sides, right? The floor. So what you're seeing is the sheer size and scale of the frame of the door. Please have a look at how sturdy each one of the frames are. Right? And so what you're seeing is a metal frame where a solid wood door is mounted or a hollow metal door is mounted. Hollow metal door is on the right and solid wood door is on the left. There are various other features which I'll jump to in my next slides, but in general, this is what you're looking for. Now, basics of security. I like what Dov said before, and also David, that in a lot of cases, right, and I said it also in my few previous webinars, it's so unfair to the community when we as practitioners assume that you understand or that you have the same level of understanding as we do. Of course you don't, okay? We completely respect that. So we want to give you these examples that are a little bit easier to understand. Okay, and so that you can gradually build your understanding and awareness when you engage with vendors, or when you engage with manufacturers, or when you're walking around your facility and you're asking yourself, what can help make my facility more secure. These are the 5 basic features of well-established security solutions, security applications for doors. From left to right. On the left, you will see that it is grade 1 mortise lock set with a deadbolt. Now, there are different types of mortise lock sets. So don't assume that this is the only version that works on every single door in your facility. Remember what Dov said, that code compliance is very important. And so there are a multitude of versions of mortise lock sets, depending on where they're being used. If it's a perimeter door, it's one type of mortise lock set. And I will show you what a mortise lock set in general looks like when it's removed from the door, when it's just by itself, so that you can understand the difference between why a mortise lock set is better than something like a cylindrical lock set. Now, moving forward, concealed door hinges. We talked about the fact that I can install the best security door possible, but if the hinges are not protected, I can take that door off the hinges very quickly, and I can remove that door, no matter how great it is, completely away from the opening, right? So hinges also play a role in protecting your facility and making it more challenging for someone to make their way into your facility or into a specific space in your facility. Next up is a latch guard, right? I'm sure you've seen a bunch of those when you walk around your neighborhood. Maybe one is installed on several doors at your facility. Very, very trivial application. Doesn't cost a whole lot of money, but it does prevent multiple attempts, very trivial attempts with easy tools of how to beat most of the locks, even when they're locked, latched, and closed, right? And the door seems to be secure. But if you attack the latch, which in a lot of cases is the easiest point, latch guards help protect from such attacks. On the right side, at the top, we have a door closer. Okay, a door closer, if it's installed properly and it's of the right function, helps pull the door back into a closed and latched position. It's a wonderful design component for all doors because it removes or it reduces the human forgetfulness. I may walk by, the door will be pulled out, I'm walking in, and if there's no door closer, the door will stay open if it doesn't have any other element to help pull it back into a closed position. Without the door closer, human error is increased. If you do have the door closer, human error is reduced. However, a lot of contractors don't know that there are 2 types of door closers. One door closer is automatic close, right? So it does not have any features to stop the door at a 90-degree open position. But there are door closers that unfortunately keep the door open. That is a convenience feature, but it's something that we do not recommend. We want a door closer that closes your door as you walk through it, right behind you, so you don't have to think about it closing on its own. The very last feature, which is seen, I would say, a little bit more frequently these days, but for a number of years, it was considered to be a more high security application for, let's say, safe rooms and places where, well, high net worth residential compounds use that as well. So it's a well-known feature. It just hasn't been used very, very often in a commercial setting or in the setting of nonprofits. But here it is, pinned hinge. Even if the hinge is exposed, it's impossible or very challenging for me to remove the door because the hinge then is held by a pin that goes into the door frame or the opening in the hinge. Without giving you too many technical details, it helps keep the door in place, even if I remove the pin, the top or the vertical pin of the hinge to try to remove the door off its hinges. That is the pinned hinge. Again, we welcome any questions after this. If some of this is a little bit too technical, please reach out to us or post a question in the chat box to Terry, and we will.
One second. Dov, Adam, and I were at a synagogue yesterday, and one of the doors we said, look, we need to have a pinned hinge, and that would make that door 700% safer. Just the fact that someone couldn't remove the pin and then remove the door. It's just an easy, inexpensive fix.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. This is why this is a solution that, again, hasn't been widely used in commercial applications or in nonprofit applications, but it has been widely used for years for high net worth facilities where they're protecting high net worth families and individuals. A little bit more detail. On the left, you will see a lock, which is called a cylindrical lock, that you should never use. I'll stop right there. I'm sure that as you're looking at that lock, you're saying, oh, wait, we have a ton of them. Okay. So if that's your situation, this is one of the few features that you should start evaluating for replacement. Why? Well, multiple reasons, but two primary reasons is that the lock is the flimsiest of the ones that at least I'm showing you. The latch particularly, and that's the little pin that you will see sticking out on the leftmost side of the photo, the latch can be compromised very, very easily. Okay. I've done this with a credit card. I've done this with all sorts of devices and little tools that are just, you can get it anywhere. It could be even the key sometimes. And so these locks are sold very widely because they're very inexpensive. However, it should be removed from your future security upgrade lists and your discussions with your vendors or manufacturers. The next one, going from left to right, is a vertical rod device. I'm sure you've seen many of these, particularly these are used very widely on double leaf doors. So remember, we talked during the last webinar when you have two panels, two leaves that open. And so a vertical rod device is very interesting. Why? Because on the one hand, it actually is made specifically to meet, in most jurisdictions, fire code requirements. Okay, because it's single motion egress. You press on the bar and you exit if the door swings in the right direction, right? But it also creates additional points of holding the door in place when the vertical rod closes and latches. Okay, so not only is it held at one point, right? So in most situations you'll see a latch going from the side of the door into the latch receiver, right? But in this case, the door is held in 2 points, top and bottom, right? Of course, like any lock, something like this would also require proper installation, workmanship, and good maintenance. However, you're buying something that's far more sturdy and also code compliant in most situations. Next up is what I showed you a bit earlier, is a mortise lock, okay? Mortise locks, because of the sheer size of the metal assembly, and you'll see that's basically, it's a square lock, square body that you insert into a door, far more challenging to compromise, especially if it's rated at ANSI grade 1. Lots of different security features, and I'll show you that it could also be an electrified lock, part of your access control system. And notice the difference, both the latch and an additional throw bolt, the big metal block that goes into the door's latch receiver, those are the parts that are holding the door in place when you lock the door. So it's a much more preferred security application. Again, code compliance is very important. That's why I'm not just putting a green checkbox or a check circle there. I'm simply suggesting to you that these are some of the devices that you should be thinking about and considering how they comply with codes in your jurisdictions and where specifically your facility you would install them, right? And mortise lock sets can be found both at perimeter doors, they could be found on interior doors. So they're used very widely, depending on the type of doors that you're buying. The very last one on the right is what's called a rim lock. Rim locks are primarily applied on the surface of the door. Okay, so I'm sure that I lived in Brooklyn, and a lot of the buildings that were built in the around 40s and 50s, they have a lot of these locks where nothing is drilled in the door. So it's not a mortise or there's no preparation on the door other than just a hole for the key cylinder. But these locks are primarily on the interior, the secure side of the door, and they're applied on the surface. And they're basically controlled only from the inside with the key cylinder sometimes featured to open it from the outside. But these locks again, were developed to prevent a lot of crime in New York City. I may not be accurate on the date, but around the 50s, if I recall correctly. But they were invented at the end of the 19th century, if I recall, again, for crime fighting reasons, to prevent a bunch of burglaries. Rim locks, the version I'm showing you, is probably more for residential applications. However, there are a great variety of fire code compliant rim locks with push bars looking similar to the vertical rod lock that I showed you. Now, these devices you also may have seen. So on the left, it's a typical electrified strike. Then you see the magnetic maglock, as many of you may know it. So it's basically a magnet. Then a mortise, similar to the one that I showed you before, but in this case, it's an electrified version. And again, one not to use, but I have to show it to you, that cylindrical locks can also be electrified. But again, this is not something we recommend. Now, let's take a step back and take a look at strikes and magnets. Both of those types are constantly electrified. So if you think about it, they're more susceptible to failure. They require a little bit more maintenance. Magnetic locks in particular, if not correctly specified, have inferior holding force. So I have seen instances where I could just kick the door and open it, even if it's held by a magnetic lock, just because it doesn't have enough holding force. But I just said two words, holding force, right? You probably don't know what the appropriate holding force is or what it is in general, you see? And so please remember that as we get into locking, or if you've spoken to a locksmith ever, right? They probably, like to a lot of us, they speak in code. It's because locks are highly, highly diverse and complicated. The two models on the left, the strike and magnetic lock, are very widely used in our community to secure doors. And they're used in access control applications, or with just intercoms and remote unlock. Certainly, it's a relatively good solution. It's just installers and those who maintain those locks often complain about the fact that they fail, they overheat, or they're not properly installed, or just the fact that there could be just a few additional failures with these locks that a lock like mortise would not have. Okay, just as simply a feature of design. With magnetic locks particularly, if the installation is poor, even if the holding force is significant, poor installation reduces the holding force. And therefore, I've seen many instances where it's a brand new magnetic lock, and I could just apply a little bit of weight with my shoulder on the door, and it pops right open. Now, I specifically put this on for you not to squint. I ask you to please not to read anything that you see in front of you. I only ask you to read the symbol in the upper left corner. Why am I showing you this? These are pages 48 and 49 from a professional product literature provided by a lock manufacturer, where they're teaching us, the consumers, how to properly order these locks. Why am I showing you this? Is to tell you that there is no way that you can possibly open these two pages and specify what you need. So the reason why I don't want you to read it is that you don't have to. Okay, it will not help you. These are pages 48 and 49 of a thick booklet that a lock manufacturer offers to consumers to try to specify what locking they need. Okay, even I don't know what it says, to be brutally honest with you. So if I were to try to specify from this particular widely available, because all you need to do is just to go to this company's website and just to look this up, a product catalog. Okay, and you will very quickly realize that you'll be lost in the first few seconds. So the reason why I'm showing you this is, unfortunately, within our community, so you have a team at CSI that's trying to guide you and trying to give you as much advice as we can. But we don't have illusions. We know very well that the community does not have the wherewithal to go and be professional door hardware specifiers, where they can look at this page and say, oh, I know what I need. I just mark off this bit, that bit, and I'll give it to a vendor, right? That's not going to happen. For this, you need a door hardware consultant. Okay. So we're hoping to offer you in the near future, hopefully, and Dov will correct me, I think it's March 8th that we're trying to book a very capable door hardware consultant to go through this. So please stand by for, for the next couple of weeks. We will give you a little bit more detail on how door hardware and locking consulting works, and why is it so important, and why people with that knowledge are valued very much in the industry. So I'm simply demonstrating to you that please don't attempt to buy products using these pages. Okay, talk to us. We will put you in touch with the right practitioners who can help you. And when vendors come to you and start sliding these pages across, it's a trick to make you feel as though you're buying something sophisticated, but you actually don't understand what it says and what the vendor is trying to sell to you. So be aware. We'll boil it down to a few general rules. As we're trying to do this for now every webinar, at least several more recent webinars, it's again, we don't want to have false assumptions about everyone's level of understanding and knowledge. So we're trying to drop the code, remove exclusive language, right? And try to speak to you in simple terms so that we all are on the same page when we discuss your next upgrade, your next project, right? Here's what we suggest. Steel doors and frames are generally most secure. Okay, so remember I mentioned hollow metal doors, right? Steel doors and frames are generally most secure. We want to, as I said before, we want to eliminate or minimize the use of glass inserts in the doors. But again, if your aesthetics mandate it, please let us know and we will help you make the right choice. Electrified locking is better than mechanical, and I'm putting 3 asterisks there. Now, why am I saying this? Because I think that our friends from Security Tech and from other manufacturing organizations will look at me and say, wait a second, what's going on here? So the reason why I'm saying this is, think about a situation where you have a mechanical lock, right? There is no way to release it remotely. I'm a bad guy. I'm knocking on your door, and you need to be at the door on the other side to help open the door, right less than a foot away from me, simply being separated by that door leaf. That's the feature of a mechanical lock. You won't be able to release it remotely unless there is some additional hardware there, electrified, that you can manipulate remotely. So the reason why I prefer electrified locking is because it gives you that opportunity to create more distance between you and the attacker. So I'm not trying to say, oh, buy only electrified hardware. Of course, it doesn't apply in all circumstances. I understand. I'm simply trying to connect 2 very important points. You can still have secure doors and door hardware, but you can also, if you have the right fit for purpose, you can also help yourselves create more distance between you and the threat actor. So electrified hardware helps you do that. Don't need to belabor the point, simply look back and talk to your local authorities about code compliance, both building codes and fire codes. Our preference are mortise locks, right? Obviously, they need to be specified based on the type of doors you're procuring, based on the types of entry and exit. Mortise lock should be, in general, your first choice, and then engage with our team and engage with manufacturers if you can, with the vendors once you're bidding, to decide what would be the best applications and field any questions from them. Walls around the door should not be ignored, right? Because we've seen many times where the door and the frame and the locking is all perfect. Okay, or as close to perfect as they can be. And then the wall is sheetrock, I could just punch right through it and walk through that way. And by the way, that's not protecting me from an active assailant, if you will, okay? An armed assailant. So walls around the door is a very important feature, so don't ignore that. And last but not least, and probably something for you to constantly keep in mind. New York is a very funny market. Or New York in general is a very funny market. I can speak to it because I've dealt with a bunch of integrators. I've worked for an integrator. I've specified systems and so on. What I noticed is that not everybody is very ethical, right? So for them, they'll cut corners, they'll do this, it works, that's fine. I don't have to give them product literature, or I'll install it, walk away, bill, and then you'll never find me. Or I'll give you a bill of goods, which will only say lock. It's not going to explain what kind of lock, what am I selling, what model, brand, whatever. And I'm still selling it to you. You're buying it happily. I'm installing it and it doesn't work. And you have full sense of security. New York is a funny market. Okay. Quality installation and maintenance are absolutely essential. I've seen a ton of cases, especially existing facilities, who swear by their perimeter doors. They say, Ilya, we just upgraded, okay? I come up to the door and I say, well, wait a second, the frame is warped, okay? The door is out of alignment. It doesn't latch properly, right? So somebody is not maintaining it. And yet, and also maybe somebody didn't install it right. Who checks on that? So again, it's last but not least. When you have completed your project, and when you're just at the end, at the tail end of your installation, right? Make sure that before you pay that last bill, before you released that check, before you made that wire transfer, somebody can attest to you, or on your team, somebody has enough knowledge about it who can say, yeah, they did a good job. It seems like it's been professionally installed. Okay, now, this is a bit of a curveball. I'm sure that very few of your teams or very few of your volunteers or people on your staff understand what is a good installation. Give us a call. We will put you in touch with the right people, or we will be able to give you some ideas ourselves, okay? Don't ignore quality of installation, and then afterwards, the quality of maintenance. Last, I'll leave you with the last thought. That if you do maintenance on your doors and locks, right? And if you do this at least every year, you'll be far better off than anyone else around you, okay? Because if you do this at least annually, right? And I don't like suggesting annual stuff. I typically like things to be more frequent, but at the very minimum, if you do this annually, it works. Now, if you have a facilities person, even better. They can be checking this every day. If you have a security person, you can teach them to check on things every day. Does this door close and latch? And you can ask those vendors, the integrators that install these things, for checklists. How do we internally go around our facility to notice any trivial signs of deterioration? Okay, what should we be looking for? Figure that out before you finish your project. Make vendors tell you, okay, what should you be looking for as part of your maintenance? And I assure you, you'll save yourselves several $1,000s a year if you simply just do preventative walkarounds, just to make sure that everything is working as you would like. On that note, passing it back to my friend Dov.
Thank you, Ilya. Amazing stuff. Just before, let's pull up that last Q&A. We got a few minutes left. Obviously, we'll stay here past the 11 o'clock mark for those who want to make sure they hear all the questions. But as we turn to this last poll, which we do use to guide our next sessions, I'd just like to say this last plug. Remember the complete puzzle. That's whether it's for the door projects or any projects you do. There's many components to it. Like Ilya has just gone through the last few slides. It's not just the door itself. It's the latching. It's the hardware. It's the wall around it. It's the other doors. It's the the maintenance door. And it's the culture too. So all those pieces go together to do this right. Also, reminder as the poll comes through and as Terry comes up to do some Q&A with us, all these sessions are recorded, as it says in the top corner, recording, and we post them like we mentioned in the beginning of this webinar. Every session is posted on our Consultants Corner webpage. When you get the email signups each week, there's links to our webpage. And we also have FAQ. So for some reason you couldn't aren't able to stay on to hear your question answered, we'll post it there, and you can come back and review and get the answer you need. All right, pretty split poll so far. All right, we'll definitely take this into consideration. I'm going to take this down, and if Terry's available, let's jump into the Q&A. And I apologize, we'll probably go a few minutes past the 11, but that's what we're here for. So thank you.
Thanks, Dov. If you hang on 1 second, just trying to get organized here. We have a number of questions, but I think the most important one, and it's kind of off topic. Let me point out first, as Dov said, if we don't get to your questions and you know your regional security manager's email address, contact your regional security manager and we can answer your questions, just in case we don't get to them today or you're not satisfied with our answers. That's number one. If you don't know the regional manager's address, CSI_questions@JCRC-NY.org will get you to the same place. That really comes to all of us, and one of us will figure out which regional security manager is yours, and we'll get you the answers that you need. And if we don't have them, we'll look them up, we'll find them. But I want to ask David to answer this question first, because I think it's probably more important than everything we discussed today. Why? Because a lot of people don't have the security they need and they're looking for grants. So David, could you just walk us through a couple of quick points on what people can do to get ready for the grant and what the implications are this year in terms of timing?
So I believe David stepped away from his screen for a moment. So I can answer. Dov, you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. Guys,
Okay.
the most important thing definitely is the federal NSGP, the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, requires an assessment. So whoever you're using, and many of you in New York work with your regional security manager at JCRC, get that assessment. I mean, they're booking up. They might, the schedule gets tight, but we try to get ahead of it. The open period will probably be a short period this year, just because if you're following how the Congress is working, they passed their continuing resolution, meaning they haven't passed the budget that includes this amazing funding. But fortunately, there's hopefully more and more each year. You can also, if you've applied before, or even if you haven't, find a copy of the application, which is called an investment justification, an IJ. We have on David's security grants website, JCRC-NY.org/security grants. There's a lot of information that will guide you through everything here, but look for the investment justification tab. It's an Excel spreadsheet. There will likely be a few changes here. If you start doing that, that will start you on your application, and also your grants gateway, which is in New York State, which all grantees are required to be pre-approved and pre-authorized, your background information, your legal documents, etc. Anything else, Seth, you think?
No, I think you got it. I'll just post some of those links so people can take it while you're speaking.
And please heed this advice. David did mention when we started the program that the actual application period may be quite concise this year. It really depends on the overall budget when it's approved, but there are some legal issues that don't allow this application period to go much longer than a month or thereabouts, but it could be shortened because of the individual state application process down to 2 weeks. So you want to have all your ducks in order. You want to have your assessment ready to go before this thing gets announced. So take care of all of those steps ahead of time. Dov, real quick, it's another sort of off-topic question, but it's another one that comes up all the time. What about our recommended vendors list? How do we look on that?
Gotcha. Well, I definitely want to stay away from any type of recommended or referral. There's some work behind the scenes. There's just some legal implications. Very important, definitely to get to you. But in the interim, please work with your RSMs. Go, share your advertisement, and we can distribute. And it's been a pretty effective process, and keeps it within the kosher procurement rules till we have that up and we figure out all the pieces we need to have in place. But hopefully soon.
Ilya, when it comes to doors and locks, that was, a lot covered today. Can you elaborate a little bit on, you talk about solid doors. What about people's? What about being able to see through those doors when somebody's at the door? And then I'll add the second piece to that. What about door and lock maintenance? I mean, do you just put these doors up and then you're good to go, or is maintenance you got to think about?
First thing first is that on one of my slides, and you can go back to the recording of it when it's posted, you'll see that actually one of the two secure door examples, actually both those examples on that slide have peepholes. This one is covered by like a metal plate, but both doors feature some type of viewer, right? It's not a crime to have a way to see somebody who's on the other side of the door. It's perfectly fine. It's expected. However, to be honest with you, I don't want you to stand on that side. I don't want you to be looking at that peephole. My preference, and that's what you should be striving to accomplish, is to create as much distance between you, who's vetting people who are coming to your facility, and the person on the other side of that door. So what we've seen a lot of facilities do is they add an intercom. They're not expensive, but they give you a video camera. They give you a doorbell. They give you a cable that's connected, a station on any desk, or a mobile phone that gives you who's there, gives you their video, gives you their audio, and you're still yards away from that person, okay? So the farther away you are, the safer you are. So that is the reason why I said that electrified locking hardware helps facilitate that setting. If you are stuck with mechanical hardware and you have to come to that secure door of yours, yeah, it's okay to have a viewer, no big deal. Although we strongly recommend that you keep that distance between you and the threat actor or potential threat actor.
I'll add, it's part of that complete puzzle. Even how you do your views, your cameras, it supports your access control and your door hardening.
And so the next point I heard, thank you, Terry, for raising that. No, nothing about any security upgrades is plug and play. Nothing, okay? You don't just install and wash your hands. Everything you do everything you have requires maintenance, okay? Even the things around your house require maintenance. Your roof, right? At some point, you got to replace it, right? Or maintain it. Your gutters need to be cleaned, right? Your windows at some point need to be either caulked again or, winterized, whatever. Same with your car, right? Imagine if you don't maintain your car. Just imagine, just don't do anything to it for 5 years. See what happens, okay? Why would you leave security without maintenance? Okay, so it's very trivial. Maintain it.
This is getting a little more specific. So we have one of the participants has Mortise locks. They just installed digital locks. Problem is that when they need to remember to put the knob in the lock position when closing the door. What happens if you forget?
It's an incorrect installation, because the model of the lock specified or requested or installed should not have been installed without an explanation of how it actually functions. Now that you have them, please go back to your vendor who put those locks in and discuss with them the best way to automate locking, okay? So that you don't have to rely on humans. We are terrible at remembering what's going on around us, okay? We have lack of attention. We have inattention blindness. We're subject to so many things. I can yell out your name and you're trying to lock the door, you look the other way and poof, you forgot everything that you're doing, okay? We at JCRC at some point will give you a little bit more on human behavior at some point. That's my wish, okay? It's just, I'm planting a seed with David, okay? But believe you me, right? You got to go back to your vendor and tell them, okay, listen, this thing is, we're kind of forgetting to lock it. How do we avoid that thing altogether? We want to reduce human error. Okay, let them help you figure that out. They were the ones that recommended these locks to you. So they're the ones that have to hold the torch to help you. If they don't, we're here to talk to you more.
We also talked a lot about electronics. What happens if the power goes out overall?
Wonderful question. And I go back to what Dov said, pieces of the puzzle. Okay, when you electrify your locks, guess what happens? A lot of those locks will be on what? Backup power. Why? They're all connected to a battery. If the power in the building fails, there will be some limited time for these locks to stay activated. Okay, now, the only locks that must drop out, and this is where you get into the weeds of fire code, are the locks for egress doors, okay? Because by default, by fire code, those locks have to drop out. And this is why magnetic locks are so difficult and challenging for security, because fire code mandates that any magnetic lock be what's called fail-safe, meaning that during a fire alarm, or let's say smoke condition, whatever the alarm activates, those mag locks just unlock the door completely. Now, so when you are discussing these projects of yours, right, you have to look at those two things, right? If I'm electrifying, do I have battery backup, right? And for how long is that battery backup going to last, right? Typically, it's specified at 30 minutes, right? Yeah, depending on the vendor, they might say, you know what, we're going to give you 10 minutes and that's it, right? So please remember that you have to think about, okay, we're at JCRC recommending at least 10 minutes of prevention of forced entry, right? So you have to have at least a little bit more than 10 minutes on battery backup, right? So good question, get battery backup.
Okay, now we're getting into a little more complicated stuff where it's even confusing me. And there's one is a comment, one is a question. I'm going to read both and let you try to elaborate on it. So we have a comment that vertical rod egress devices should never have crash bars. Touch bars are much more secure. Keep that in mind and perhaps integrate it with the question, which is which of the locks works on a double door with a crash bar? Only the vertical rod lock? So can you talk a little bit about crash bars, touch bars, and vertical rod locks?
Okay, so any one of those types of locks is better than a cylindrical lock. Let's just make that very clear. Okay, now, and again, I don't want to, it's like, we don't want to give you a 2-minute door hardware consulting course because it's unfair, right? I'm going to say something, even if you review it 5 times, right? I still have to load you up with a lot more information. I'll take that point. We'll probably design something and we'll ask our door hardware consultant to go through those bits. But in general, I don't like the word never, first of all. So everything has fit for purpose. Okay. So I'm generally less, let's put it this way. I've seen fewer projects where touch bars were used. Because again, they then require to be part of the electrified assembly. In a lot of conditions, that may be against fire code. And in a lot of conditions, that could be, again, a point of maintenance. If they're not maintained well, right, that touch bar may actually not work as you come out. The crash bars have different formats. The one that I showed you is just one of the ways that it looks. You probably have seen more like just a metal piece that has something that you push into, right? Fine, no problem. That can be used. This is where I would say, if you're planning your next installation or if you're planning your next upgrade, let's take this conversation offline. Let us understand what you're trying to do, and then we can point you in the right direction. However, vertical rod device, just to finish off, is not the only lock that's being used. I also told you that there's mortise applications, that there's rim applications. So all of those are used on double doors. But here is where vertical rod to me stands out as a slightly better feature. Why? Because it's a multi-point protection. It holds the door in place in more places, at least by one, then a mortise, then a rim device. And also a vertical rod, if maintained properly, because of the multi-point latching, reduces the human error, where the leaf of the second leaf that's more like rarely used can be unpinned mechanically, and then you'll forget about it, and then the whole door is defeated. The entire security of that door is defeated. I know what I just said. You'll probably have to either, if you want to, you can watch it again, but we will try to be a little bit more clear when we get our door hardware consultant on the line.
I'm going to wind this down. We're getting close to the 11:15 mark, but I'm going to throw another compound question at you. It has 2 components to it. So I'm going to reinforce my door, and I have drywall, and I want to upgrade my doors, but I have lousy walls. Can we touch on that a little bit? And what about Shabbat?
So let's do the sheetrock first. I think we mentioned already that depending on the construction of your wall, that's certainly a consideration, depending on well, first of all, I doubt very much that your perimeter demising wall will be made of just thin sheetrock, because just for winterization and for climate control, right? So the perimeter walls tend to be a little bit more sturdy. Interior walls are typically made from thinner materials, let's say, even though I know that in school facilities, those are typically cinder block, but I've seen facilities that are of smaller scale, whatever, but they may have sheetrock walls. Of course, they need to be reinforced if you're reinforcing your doors, right? So you have to look at installation of interior metal mesh that prevents easy access through sheetrock. It's not going to protect you from gunfire, but at least it's going to be blind gunfire in the first few seconds. So metal mesh installation inside the existing walls, it does require, it's a little bit more laborious, if you will. You have to open up the wall and put that in, but it is something that I've seen done. There are additional reinforcements that can be done between the studs, but again, you have to really look at what you have in place today. So I can't give you like several generic solutions here. But if you are concerned about that beyond what I just mentioned, then of course, reach out to us. As far as Shabbat is concerned, this is where it's very important to have conversations with manufacturers of locking devices, and also reaching out to your peers. Because in Brooklyn alone, I have seen multiple applications where there were sturdy locks, they were electrified, but they worked on Shabbat as well. And David, back me up on this. I'm sure that you've seen a bunch of these too, and Bill as well. So go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, sure. Well, first on the wall piece, before we get to the Shabbos locks, right, there's a couple options: the elongated steel mesh, there's poured concrete, there's certain bullet resistant type fiberglasses, depending what you're trying to do, but there are options. And we're glad that question came up. That's thinking about the whole puzzle. We don't want someone just punching through and opening your door latch, or similarly through a glass side light and opening the door latch. Regarding what to do on Shabbos or Yom Tov, I remember 15 years ago when I was with David, before I went over to DHSCS, we did a training on how to create a system that marries both the electronic hardware and turns it off for Shabbos, or at least for the hours you need, right? Obviously, if we went from wide open doors 7 days a week and now we increased it to 6.5 days a week, it's improved. But there are ways that you can basically shunt the electrified locking. And for this time, it might not be as strong, but you can override with some sort of mechanical cipher. We mentioned a few times our friend, right? So it's still locked. You should change that code periodically. You shouldn't share it too widely. Maybe you supplement the door with a volunteer or paid security or greeter, right? Security personnel or greeter. Like, there's multiple pieces to this same puzzle, so many pieces. And there are products out there nowadays, from my 15-year ago design to actual products on the market with, I know our friends at Securitech do have a product that uses both the electrified when not Shabbos, and you turns it off, shunts it when you need the other locking capabilities. I'm sure there are a few more on the market. I've never personally tested, but I've seen them out there. So it's an important question, because just because we need to come in and out doesn't mean we undo it. That's when everyone's in shul, right? That's the time we need those doors secured. So again, apply those layers, apply the puzzle, and there definitely is hardware out there that can do both needs. So just a little bit of research, reach out to your RSM, and put it also, when you do make those specs that we're talking about, tell them what you're looking for. Just because it might not seem obvious, let's just not turn off our electrified locks, whether they are magnetic or a strike or ideally a mortise. So it's a great question. It's that continuous thinking of the puzzle pieces.
All right, I think we're at 11:17, and the questions of, I think we got to them all. If we didn't, remember, you can hit us all up at CSI_questions at JCRC-NY.org. Or, of course, if you know who your regional security manager is, please don't hesitate to contact us. We'll try to get you the answers you need as quickly as possible. Del, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Sure thing. Thank you. I know we're over time, but we're having fun. We're getting in deep. One last piece. I did see a question in my personal chat. Please continue when we do these to go to Terry, just because we got a couple things we do behind the scenes, but talked about that you had sometimes for exiting a building, you have to push a button, an exit button, to release the latch, which is a good setup. But what happened? What we're talking about fire codes. What do we do then? Back to what Ilya was saying before. If an alarm is activated, you won't be required to also press that exit to that exit button to also release through the magnetic locks. So just wanted to make sure I answered that one as well. We'll try to make sure we plug it in our FAQs. Thank you, Ilya, of course. Thank you, Seth, David, Terry, for our Q&A. Everybody, hope to see you next week, and keep the questions coming. Thank you.
Thanks all.